Very good. Well, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Su-Ling Ching, and it's my honor to be the President and CEO of the Ottawa Board of Trade. And I want to say thank you to all of us for joining today. We hope that the webinar series that we have created has brought value to our business community in our attempt to support all of you through this challenging time of being in a pandemic, and but still looking for ways to keep our businesses going and look forward to recovery and then thriving into the new year. So just to give you a few updates, the Ottawa Board of Trade has been active as your voice of business over these last 7 weeks and 4 days. and 8 hours, and continuing to meet with and engage all of our policy committees to make sure that we have a great understanding of the particular challenges that we're facing right now, and challenges and opportunities, because as we know, there have been a lot of shifts where businesses have been extremely creative and innovative in how they're going about their business, and we want to celebrate all of that as well. We've been very active as well with the Ontario and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and ensuring that the information that we are getting is being filtered through to the decision makers at all levels of government, and then also engaging ourselves with all levels of government, including the City of Ottawa, to ensure that we are supporting businesses now and getting ready for a rebound as well. In addition to that, I want to say thank you to Lynn Ladd from our Ottawa Board of Trade team for continuing to provide a way for businesses to be supported through programs, virtually, of course, and then also our team has continued to work on the benefit packages that are able to support our businesses by saving money and creating new opportunities for promotion. So our door is always open, and we are happy to take any questions. We have a specific email set up for all of you during this time called strongertogether@ottawabot.ca, where we're monitoring questions specific to our current situation, and we encourage you to use that. I also want to say thank you to all of the member businesses who have continued to support us through this time by being members, by being active volunteers and promoters, and also by being sponsors of the programs that we're running. Today, I would like to say to the Ottawa Citizen, who is our annual community partner, as well as our event sponsor, Enbridge Inc. And then, of course, today in particular, our presentation partners and brand new members as well to the Board of Trade, the Business Sherpa Group. So thank you very much for your continued support. Now, without further ado, we want to get on with the presentation. We're looking forward to this presentation, and all of our presentations offer valuable information, inspiration, and ideas for innovation. And we have two experts with us here today, and I'd like to take a moment to introduce them. The first is Todd Luckasavitch. Did I get that right, Todd?
That was absolutely perfect, Suling.
Was it? Okay. That's not my strength, so I appreciate that.
Very few people get it on the first try.
So Todd is the General Manager at Business Solutions at the Business Sherpa Group. He is an executive level HR professional and consultant with 23 years of experience in multiple HR disciplines, including HR and recruitment system and process design, succession planning, career and leadership development, compensation, as well as organizational design and change management. Todd has a strong leadership experience developed through managing HR initiatives and system-related projects at a global level, as well as through leading various practice areas at Business Sherpa Group. So welcome, Todd.
Thank you.
And we have a colleague of yours here who's going to be an expert presenter as well, and that is Zach Fleming. So thank you for being here, Zach. Zach is the managed recruitment team lead at the Business Sherpa Group. He has worked with many different clients ranging in size and industry, and his expertise lies in guiding clients through the recruitment process and advising them on recruitment best practices and talent market conditions. Thank you both for being here and dedicating this time to our business community today. I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Suling. And after that introduction, I'm just hoping that I am able to share my screen properly. Can everyone see the presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you. We'll go ahead and get started. We're pretty pretty excited to be here. I mean, for us, the reason for the topic is, as we all know, I mean, and we see this everywhere, everyone's talking about it, we're really never going back to the norm of how work was, right? And we've seen, it's actually been a really interesting transformation. It's watching businesses go virtual and remote, and looking at some of the effective ways that they've been doing so, some of the ways they've been moving forward, but also some of the challenges. And for us, and the reason we were interested in this topic, as we work with clients and talk to people in the market, what we're really seeing is the challenge with talent. It's not just about managing your talent, it's how to build your talent, engage them, and more importantly, retain them, right? And with that, you need key talent when we start to move forward at a more rapid pace once this environment settles. So really, in terms of retaining them, and then and moving them forward, as well as recruiting. We're going to talk about it in a bit, but you're not necessarily going to need the same type of talent that you've been working with over the last 3-5 years. There may be changes in the competencies and skills you require. So Zach's going to talk about the recruiting challenges and opportunities we're seeing for this as well. We also, I mean, we want this to be interactive and as relevant as possible. It was a pretty quiet networking session at first, so please feel free to stop us at any time. We're going to have ample discussion in the second half, ample time for discussion in the second half. But we're happy to solicit questions right now, or if there's anything you'd like to ask or hope to see covered, we can make sure we either address it as part of the presentation or get to it when we finish up. And I think Zach and I both had quite a bit of coffee this morning, so I think we're ready for anything people can throw at us. You feeling good about it, Zach?
Feeling awesome.
All right. So Lynn, I don't know if anyone's chatting or has anything to ask before we start, but otherwise we can get going.
So we haven't gotten any comments in the chat section yet, but I'd just like to remind everyone who's joined us that you can post questions there or comments for Zach and Todd to respond to. So please take advantage of that. The chat button's in the bottom of your screen. It's a little white speaking bubble.
Okay, we'll move ahead just yeah, again, so for us, it's really the opportunity, right? It's what are we going to see in the new norm, and how are we going to move forward from a talent perspective? And I think we were already moving in this direction. Actually, I know. I mean, if we think about it, I know myself, you know, the role I was in 4 years ago, I left because I felt myself living in airports and airplanes. And even as I went into a new career where that wasn't the case, I really started to see the evolution in terms of, you know, less and less air travel, for example, more and more video, not just in terms of cost containment, which drove a lot of it, to be honest, but in terms of, you know, how effective and quick decisions and strategies could be made. And we already saw it with our clients. I'd say really over the last 2 years, we saw more and more of our clients virtualizing and digitizing their HR and finance functions. And what's interesting is as we went into this challenging environment, it was interesting to see the clients or the businesses that we worked with that were very hesitant, you know, when we would talk to them about potential solutions or ways to support them. It was like, no, you know, you must be on site. We need people on site. There's no way this business can function virtually. And lo and behold, this pandemic occurred, and all of a sudden, you know, they were able to flip the switch quite quickly and look at some of the opportunity that's out there in terms of automating some of their processes. And but what we're still seeing, as mentioned before, was the challenge around talent. They're nervous about it. Obviously, a lot of decisions will be made even by employees on how they're treated throughout this environment, and organizations are concerned about the challenge of keeping the talent they need to move forward, but also making sure that they understand the type of talent they're going to need to move their organization forward in this new climate, and how to recruit them. So in terms of building virtual capacity, I mean, the tools have been there. We've had video, we've had GoToMeeting, we've had Zoom, we've had chat, we've had everything for years. The interesting thing now is how we use it, right? And it's not so much how we use it, it's making sure the people and the talent we hire within our organization and have within our organization can thrive in a virtual environment, because it does take different competencies and skills. I mean, you really need people that are autonomous in the way they think and act. They need to be engaged. They need to be trustworthy and trusting, because you don't have so much of that day-to-day relationship at the coffee counter or water cooler that you're used to. I mean, now it's video, phone, chat, what have you. So it's a different type of competency and skill set in some cases, but I think for the most part, people have evolved, adapted in that way. I mean, the other piece is obviously strong communication and resiliency. But those are really the key areas we really need to look for in your talent to make sure they move the needle forward when we're ready to push. And to be honest, you want those people now, because what you don't want to do is putting on the brakes as a business, right? You want to be moving as fast as you can and keeping as productive and as engaged as you can during this time. So the big question is, do you have the right skills in your organization? Question, regardless of isolation or economic challenges or world pandemics, you need to ask constantly. And the key piece here is really making sure you're taking an inventory of your talent all the time. And what you need to do, particularly now, is really to have an understanding of what are you going to need to move your organization forward? How are you going to be even more successful in the next 6, 12, and 18 months to come? And do you have the right people for that? So part of that is really taking a step back and mapping out your strategy as a business, for one, and then mapping out the skills and competencies and type of people you're going to need to make that strategy successful. And it's really then taking a step back and matching your talent that you have against skills and competencies you need, and then taking an inventory of what are you missing, and who are the people that aren't necessarily going to be your A or B performers in this next phase or evolution of your business. So managing virtually, how do you do it? Well, in my experience, it's really not that different, to be honest. The same core principles of managing virtually are relevant, whether you're managing in-house within an office space or managing remote or have global employees across the world. It's really more about adapting your style, your leadership and management style, and making sure that you keep the fundamentals of management present and engage your employees. I thought I saw a chat question there. Should I keep going, Lynn, or do you want me to?
Keep going. Sorry, I just wanted to send you that note.
Oh, okay. Struggling with Zoom. But in terms of managing virtually, I mean, I had a VP I worked for many years, and VP of HR, and his answer to everything was always HR 101 is what's the role. And so this becomes more and more key as you manage people virtually, is they need to understand what the role is and what they're accountable for. And that means you need to understand that as well as a manager. which isn't always the case, believe it or not. So people need to understand that they're accomplishing what's expected of them. Where they fit in the operating structure, it's even more so right now important to understand who you report to. And sometimes, especially virtually, when you get into matrix or dual reporting situations, it becomes very complex and more difficult for the employee. And it goes without saying, ensure communication and collaboration tools are adopted. Like it or not, that it's got to be there, and people have to use them. So even if it's implemented into policy, it makes me think of back years ago when we started to use chat in the organization I was in, and there was so much pushback of people saying, "I don't like chat. I just want to use email." So now that type of communication form is not even a question. People need to adopt it. And then again, maintaining regular calls and check-ins with individuals and teams. This is critical, whether you're doing it virtually or in person. And interesting enough, a lot of the 360s we do, the big thing is that comes out of that is just pure communication and the lack of regular scheduled agenda type meetings that people have with their leaders and managers. And then transparency as well. The water cooler discussions become almost more and more critical virtually, and actually can be more damaging. So people are still doing the water cooler discussions, whether it's by phone, chat, or video. And what you don't want them to do is be, making up their own stories around where they think the company is going, who's doing what's the next move. It's critical to be as transparent as possible. And even in these times where you may be struggling as a business, the employees need to know that, and they want to know it, right? It's there's no point in giving them information that's not true. You want to keep it relevant. And then obviously fostering a culture which managers are enablers rather than overseers. I think the days of the manager appearing over the cubicle like in office space are just long gone, right? Managers have to trust their employees. They need to engage their employees. They need to make them accountable. And they need to let them fail if, and develop from that. And then the other piece as well, which is huge, is you can't forget about performance management. Performance management just remains so critical when you're managing virtually. Again, people need to understand their objectives and how they're performing. That's the key piece of engagement, is keeping them accountable and understanding, where it is you want them to focus their attention and what you expect of them. So in terms of engaging and retaining, one of the key three pieces that we see is really leadership, intention, and persistence. And a big part of this is employees need to know what you're doing as a manager and leader as well. It can't just be, what are they doing? And as much as you need to know what they're doing, they want to know, what your day-to-day activity is, what you're focusing on in terms of strategy and what's next for the business. And then obviously the communication piece, in terms of engaging and retaining. You have to encourage open and frequent communication. And, everyone's turning to video, which is good. It's the most intimate and engaging method of communication we have right now. But don't underestimate the value of understanding what your employees' communication and scheduling preferences are. A lot of people, like me personally, I love chat. I find I get things done very quickly by using chat with employees and colleagues, and even with external people. So don't underestimate asking your team what their preference is. They don't always have to use video. Some of the employees I have, we actually just use phone, and because we don't want to be on video all day. But make sure you understand the communication and scheduling preferences, keeping in mind not only time zones in some cases, but a lot of the employees or people you're working with have parenting or personal commitments that can influence their availability, especially right now. A lot of with daycares closed, a lot of little ones at home. And I know for us, we have a few people we schedule around nap time and 4 o'clock outdoors. So, very important to keep that in mind too, from an engagement standpoint. And then the other part too is just overall connection, right? And this is not so much just about keeping people up to date or what's going on at work, but really making sure you're connecting with people and connecting them with what the company remains focused on. And a lot of that too is reiterating your mission and values in your communication, and a lot of the initiatives you're launching. How does that come back to the values and mission that the company have always ran by? Because you don't really want to change that right now. I mean, this is something you've set on, the employees are committed to, so you need to bring that back and make them aware of your strategy and goals are still set around that. The other key piece is onboarding and offboarding processes, and and it's not just the process, but it's the communication around that. So, I mean, onboarding processes have been done remote for some time now. It's very easily done, although people question it. But I mean, again, onboarding starts from the time that your new hire accepts the offer right through to day one, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, right through to the first year. And if you build a plan that can be managed virtually and online throughout that whole process, it works extremely well. We've seen it with many companies. And the other piece around that is make sure your employees do know who's being onboarded, there's celebration around that, what their role is, and how their role and how they will interact and work with the people that are already on board. And of course, the offboarding, which unfortunately we are seeing some of right now, key there is to ensure communication. You don't want employees finding out that a team member or a colleague has been offboarded, through, again, the water cooler, versus being transparent and letting people know that people are no longer, or individuals are no longer with them. And the other key thing, what we're seeing so much of right now, which is fun, is, the Friday afternoon video beers, the video trivia nights, sort of those social connections that are just bringing people together. And again, I was talking at the networking piece, we're all getting to know each other's pets, and we're doing a remote concert as well with one of our musicians on the team soon. So, but the other piece around this is some companies and leaders are getting discouraged if there's not full participation. And that's something you really don't need to worry about in my view. I mean, you're not going to get that when we're not virtual either, right? Some people just don't want to participate in the social aspect, or their time doesn't allow it. So it's not really a sign of disengagement. But the people that do want that social connection just really, really appreciate this. I think I'm passing it over to Zach now, but I'm happy to take any questions halfway through. Zach, I think you're up.
All right, give me one sec here. All right. So let me start by saying thanks to Su Ling and Lynn for having us, and thanks folks for attending. Lynn, I might miss out on the chat, so feel free to cut in on me if. Sorry?
I'm watching.
Oh, perfect. So yeah, feel free to cut in on me if somebody's has a hand raised or wants to say something. To cap off the session here, I'm going to talk about virtual hiring. So this is kind of the new reality of hiring. And I'm going to talk about some of the minutia. We'll get into the weeds a little bit and talk a bit about tactics. But also I want to talk about some bigger ideas. And you can think of them as themes or threads. And I want them to be kind of takeaways from this little piece of the session. And I want these big ideas ideally to kind of inform how you think about this stuff, how you think about hiring, either in a pandemic or generally, because I think they're applicable across the board. And I want them to sort of, if possible, just refresh your thinking on hiring, reinvigorate some of your thinking, guide how you think about the process and how you design your hiring process. And if you've got all that covered, at least I'd like to provoke some thought on this. So, of course, comments and questions welcome. And with that, we'll dive into kind of the framework of the day, which is opportunities and challenges. So I'll jump in there. Okay, so if you are able to hire right now, maybe opportunistically you want to hire or you need to hire, there's talent out there, okay? And there's an opportunity to acquire it, particularly now because the talent market on the employer side is naturally less competitive. Okay, when the economy is booming, it's hard. Okay, as an employer, it's hard to land that top talent because you're competing against everybody. Everybody out there, not just the organizations in your sector, just about every organization out there, or let's say many, want the same talent you do. Okay, so under normal circumstances, hiring the best people is hard. I'll say that it's still hard, but it's a bit less competitive right now. And on top of that, just the fact that you can hire, that you're in that position, indicates that you've done something right or you're doing something right. The fact that you're surviving, even thriving, that's a competitive edge for you. It's a selling feature, and it's to be highlighted. So we'll talk more about that piece, the selling piece, as we go. Okay, challenges. So clearly there's uncertainty in the world right now, in the economy and society, and that hurts a bit. That's a challenge because the best people are typically in good positions. They're doing okay, and it could be hard to pry them away from what they're up to right now, from their current position. So that's a challenge, to convince somebody to make a move to your organization at a time of uncertainty like this. Okay. The other challenge that I'd like to highlight, and that will kind of recur through these slides and that we'll touch on again and again, is the challenge of this virtual hiring environment. And we'll talk about it, but it's different. Okay. There are some pieces of the hiring process that have always been virtual, but others that have not. And so it's kind of a new world in hiring, and there's that really impacts the trust that's required to land great talent. And that'll be a key theme we touch on again and again, is trust. It's important, and I'll elaborate on that. All right. So again, I'm not going to walk through the hiring process. I won't do recruiting 101. We won't touch on every step of the process or get into too much minutia there. I'll break it up very roughly and broadly into two big categories, or two main steps of the process. First step is to develop your pool of candidates. All right, so this is before any of your interviewing or anything like that. You've got to, develop a pool, get a bunch of great people, and from there you can choose somebody. Okay. Introduce a big idea here. Always be closing. Classic sales line. And I want to impress upon you how important selling is in this process, the hiring process. Again, whether it's a pandemic or not, and we'll talk about how important that is in a virtual environment as well. But selling your opportunity doesn't start when you're at the offer stage and you're negotiating and you're trying to convince that person to join. It's happening always. And I think marketing people will be right on board with this. It never really ends. You're always watching your reputation. You're always building it. You're always aware of it. You're always selling the benefits of your organization, whether it's to customers or, in our case, to candidates, to would-be hires. Okay, so we'll be touching on that throughout. The kind of selling I mean, I'll elaborate here, is not the old school guy who shows up at your door with a vacuum cleaner and sticks his foot in the door and won't leave until you buy it. It's not that kind of bludgeoning type of sales. The kind of sales I'm talking about, when you're selling your organization and your opportunities to candidates, you're doing it comprehensively. You're doing it throughout the process. And you're taking a sophisticated approach to it. So, you're imagining those candidates in your pipeline the same way you'd imagine customers in a pipeline. You've got several touch points along the way, and you're selling at each touch point. And that sale, or that kind of interaction with a candidate, is all about showing them who you are. and developing that trust. So over time, when you get to the end of the process, because of all these touch points and because you've been informative and you've been open with candidates, they can trust you, and they're able to you know, sign that offer. They'll take a chance on you, just as you've interviewed them. In a way, they've been interviewing you the whole time. So that's the selling piece. At each point along the journey, along this hiring process, you're being clear with candidates, you're being direct, transparent, you're providing information, you're being open and communicative, you're even being candid to the extent that you can. And candidates want that. They crave it. Okay, they want to know about you. They want information. Okay, so in this time or this era, yes, of sort of lockdown and virtual hiring, virtual work, I encourage you really to put thought into your job postings. Okay, I encourage you not to, you know, go into that old dusty HR file and pull out the classic job description, which could be very good. It could be super thorough with 150 bullet points. That's great for kind of HR purposes, but in recruitment, we don't want quite that. So don't slap that up on the internet. And don't use the same old ad or posting you've used for the last year or so. Now's the time to put some thought into it, okay? You've got to address the situation or the environment we're in. The pandemic. It's the elephant in the room here. And remember that candidates want to know stuff, okay? So use the opportunity to sell. If you're thriving, talk about it, right? Describe to candidates what you've been doing, how you've adapted, how you've pivoted, how you're operating now. Provide candidates with information on what they can expect if they join, right? How have you changed your environment? Talk to them about all either the policies or the benefits you've implemented to enable people to work at home flexibly. Okay, all that stuff is good stuff. So that's in addition to the job, right? You've got your core bullet points about the job. You describe the job clearly and concisely, but talk about yourself. Talk about your organization. Okay, candidates want that. It's a real opportunity to sell right now. Okay, on that sales side, think about and salespeople, I'm sure will know this. You know, you're always trying to overcome objections, right? In making a sale, you're always trying to preempt questions. So think about that in hiring as well. If this is some kind of frontline position, customer service type position, there's potential concerns about safety there from would-be hires, from candidates. So talk about that. Talk about the mechanisms you've put in place to keep people safe. Okay, those are selling features, and they're important. You've got to get in front of that, address those questions. Okay, so part two from a on the process here. You've developed your pool. Now choose someone. We'll talk about some tactics here. Okay. Video interviewing is the new reality. And we're seeing organizations embrace that. They have to. There's no way to get people on site to do those face-to-face interviews. I haven't heard yet of a 10-foot apart face-to-face interview. I don't know if anybody's doing that, but I think video is the way to go right now. And the reality is you've got to embrace it. So we know there's old school thinking on this still, and there's kind of a mythic quality to the face-to-face interview. You got to shake their hand. You got to look in their eyes. This is all sort of, sometimes we call it gut stuff, gut feel. And really it has to fall by the wayside because it's not possible, right? You just can't have that. So for those old school hiring managers or leaders, really got to encourage them to dive in and embrace video interviewing. And same rules apply as face-to-face interviews. Be presentable, have a presentable home office. Don't bombard the candidate with 8 different interviewers. Okay, same way you wouldn't do that in person. Okay, I'd even say consider recording your interviews, of course, with the permission of candidates. Okay, so they know it's happening and they permit it. and also with an explanation of why you're doing it. Okay, talk about how it's going to help you make better decisions. That's the kind of transparency in the process that candidates crave. Okay, and you'll have some little policy around it, like you delete everything within a week or something. You come up with that. But that's an idea. In addition to interviews, you can use video to do other kinds of assessments. Okay, so with screen sharing, you can do live assessments. If you want someone to edit a document on screen in front of you, that's an assessment. You can have them do it. Okay. There are other kinds of video tools, like, if you're into engineering or you like to do some kind of problem solving with candidates, you can do it on screen on an interactive whiteboard. There are tools that enable that. Okay, so you can do a lot through video. You can do it all. You've got to embrace it. Okay, let me get to some of the pandemic specific stuff here, and some of these bigger ideas specifically around trust. So, I'll start with this. There's, again, this sort of old school thinking, and I think organizations have been moving away from it for some time, but it used to be that you'd think of hiring as if you're a team and you've got candidates trying out for your team, and they're all dying to work for you. They're banging down the door to work for you. And all you got to do is put them through the ringer and interview them and then pick the best one. Okay, that's old school thinking. It doesn't work that way because that's one-sided. That's simply you as an employer testing the candidate. The candidate didn't get to test you. Okay, the new reality, and this has been the case for some time, the environment or the market for talent is so competitive that it's a two-way street. So it's not a tryout where you're just grilling people and you get your pick of the lot. It's more like building a relationship with those top candidates, and more like a dance. Okay, it's two-sided. There's give and take. So as much as your hiring managers really want to trust that top candidate, and they're always seeking inside information, right? They're asking people if they know them, checking references, of course, digging in deep in interviews, doing background checking. All of that is so employers can trust candidates. But the top people have options. They don't necessarily need you or your opportunity. So there's a trust piece there. You need them to trust that you are who you say you are as an organization. So you need to give them some insight. And ideally, you're doing that throughout the process, right? So in your interviews and in your job postings, you're telling them who you are, what you stand for, and what you do. But through the process, you're also showing it. Okay, so you're showing transparency, you're showing fairness, you're being direct, and you're being open with candidates, and that's the best way you have to gain their trust, enable them to trust you. Okay. Now it's particularly hard to do that now because there might be stuff you don't think of, like a virtual, well, not a virtual, but an on-site tour. Think about the process where you've interviewed your top candidate. Now you invite them on site for a tour. Maybe they get to chat with some people. They get to see your environment, your facility, or the office, whatever it is. That used to go a long way because it would help candidates see how people work, see who you are, see what your environment's like. Okay? You can't do that now. You can't have people on site. You might have people work for you for 2 months before you even meet them, So that's a big deal. That's a key takeaway here. You've got to find ways to show candidates who you are without that on-site piece, okay? So the idea here is that, and I'll kind of beat on the point here, when it comes to the best candidates, the best people out there, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. Okay, it's a bit of a dance. So do everything you can to build that trust. Whether you offer a virtual tour, or whether you set up, in addition to your interviews, you set up ample time for that candidate to ask questions and get to know you better. Maybe you do it in a less formal setting. So you've gone through your interviews, and you've grilled the candidate. Now it's their turn to learn about you, and you set up like a virtual coffee chat or something where the candidate gets to meet with a couple would-be peers, people in the organization that join on the video chat and answer questions or just chat. It's a lower pressure environment, and it's going to enable that candidate to really get to know you and gain the kind of trust they're going to need to have to accept your offer, right? So leave you with that. Selling is a big piece. Trust is a big piece, and understanding that trust is a two-way street. Last thing I'll do here is a little anecdote. Lynn, how's our time? Are we doing okay?
We're doing well for time, but if we're going to have an interactive and robust question and answer session, we should wrap up fairly soon.
You got it. Okay, I'll do 2 minutes to finish here, or even one.
Perfect.
So real story here and a recent one. Had a client doing some hiring, great organization, great opportunity. It was a great role they were trying to fill. And they had a good process. Went through interviews. It was a systematic process. It was organized. It was pretty well done, but it was very much focused on the employer side. So kind of that old school process where it's just the employer grilling the candidate. So we went through it, had a great candidate, and went to offer stage. And the offer was solid. The candidate had no qualms with the offer. Money was fine. Everything about it was good. But the candidate hesitated because she hadn't been able to develop that kind of trust. She still wasn't sure that this organization was who they said they were. Okay, she was craving more information, craving that kind of inside information. And in her feedback to me, she even brought that up. She said, you know what, I didn't even get a chance to, of course, visit the office. I mean, we can't do that now. So I'm left with questions. I would have loved to have chatted with some peers and ask them questions and get kind of some of the inside, not dirt, but the kind of inside information on the company. And she didn't have that opportunity, didn't have the opportunity to ask the kind of questions she wanted. So didn't have the trust. And of course, that kind of lack of trust, it spreads. And so the organization, for their part, started to feel hesitant because they wanted that person to trust them. They thought, why don't they trust us? And so it broke down. It fell through in the end. It was a real disappointment, and it really illustrates how important it is to, at this time, in a virtual hiring environment, do all you can to allow that candidate into your world and allow them to see how things really work in your organization and who you really are. Because for them to sign that offer, for you to land that top talent, you really need their trust, just as you want to be able to trust them. And you want them coming in engaged, excited, knowing who you are and fully buying into your mission. So I'll leave it there. Lynn, I'll turn it over.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Todd and Zach, for your comments and your presentation. We'll go into Q&As in just a moment or two, give the gentlemen a chance to rest their voices, and for people to put their questions into the chat. In the meantime, I would like to thank once again our sponsors. I'd like to thank the Ottawa Citizen, who's our community partner. I'd like to thank Enbridge Gas for being an event sponsor, and of course the Business Sherpa Group for being the sponsor of our presentation this morning. And we have a number of webinars coming up that I'd like to share with you. On May the 12th, we're going to listen to Kevin Savoy of Binan Business Solutions talk about the 3 rules of a business owner. I know Kevin's on the call today and he is a great speaker, so I encourage you to tune in for that one. We're also having CP Business Solutions do a webinar on communications and marketing in the COVID-19 environment. On the 19th of May, Miami Consulting is going to share with us some information on business continuity planning. And I'm very excited about May the 20th on our Wellness Wednesday. We are going to have Dr. Etches from Ottawa Public Health do a webinar on us for us called Get Outside. And she's going to talk about ways that we can get outside and get exercise and fresh air and respect the physical distancing requirements that are in place right at the moment, and how that ties into both our physical and mental well-being. And on the 21st, we are very excited to welcome back the folks from Business Sherpa Group, a different team, and they are going to do a webinar on digitizing your finance function and why it's so important. So we have some questions in the chat now. I thought it would be a great idea to have Zach and Todd comment on what changes are going to be permanent from the pandemic and what they think will happen following recovery. But having said that, let's get to the specific questions from our guests first. Bob D'Onofrio has asked, in the current environment, roles and performance expectations are likely to change going forward. What are some of the factors to consider in deciding whether to help the current employee to transition to the changed role or hire someone else? Who'd like?
I can take that one, Zach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Bob. Thanks for the question. I'm not sure actually that it's that much different from what we do now in terms of setting our expectations and going through the performance management process with our employees. I mean, the organizations themselves, regardless of a pandemic, I think we're constantly changing now, particularly small, mid-sized organizations, to keep up with the market and the expectations of our clients. And so for us, it's what does that look like, in the next phases? And I think, short term now is very short. I mean, 3 to 6 months, where will we be? And long term is no longer the 5 years out. It's more the 12 to 24 months. And so it's really understanding where, as the business, so as you look at your forecast and your business strategy, what is it you're going to need from your employees and your talent, and setting that out in the objectives, and then bringing that back to, okay, now what skills do we need? And it's really sitting down then with the employee to be open and transparent with what you're looking for from them, right? Setting the objectives accordingly and the skills they're going to need. And it's having that open conversation to say, do we really think, are you interested in where we're going as an organization and developing these skills? Can you develop these skills? And then if the answers are no to either, then it's really having that management decision around, okay, I think we need to go outside and find this thing. And I personally am finding that more and more common, regardless of the pandemic discussion.
And Bob, did you have any follow-up questions for Todd? I've unmuted your microphone.
No, thanks. Thanks, Todd. It's basically around this: how much effort is expected of us to help the employee transition to the new role, new skill sets, as opposed to going out and hiring somebody new? And what's the implications from an HR perspective? Yeah,
well, I think Bob, again, it becomes somewhat of a performance discussion and an expectation discussion. And as the role evolves and changes, and you're openly communicating what the expectations are, if they're unable to perform it, then there is a path then to transition them out. If they're not going to be able to adapt or transform with the skills that you need.
Okay, thanks.
And Zach, we have a follow-up question for you as well. Is it then acceptable to offer candidates the opportunity to connect with team members who are not involved in the hiring process and clients?
Great question there, Leanne. Clients, so does that mean sort of allow candidates to speak to an employer's customers? I'd say no. Certainly you can bring in employees of the organization who are not necessarily part of that team that's doing the hiring, but of course, as the employer, you're going to manage that process or that mechanism, and those will be hand-picked individuals, people within your organization that are personable, engaging, have bought into your mission, are drinking your Kool-Aid to use a cliche there. So yeah, you're not going to let candidates speak to anybody, but you can let them speak to people that you choose throughout the organization that aren't necessarily part of that hiring process or aren't necessarily typical interviewers.
Thank you, Zach. So I'm not seeing any fresh questions in the chat, so I'd like to go back to my request that maybe if you could both give your comments on, there's been a lot of changes in the whole hiring process and HR. It's a whole new world almost that HR professionals are operating in, recruiters are operating in, staffing agencies have to operate in. What do you think is permanent? What changes do you think might still happen? And, I'd just be interested in some of the insights. I'm sure you're both following all kinds of thought leaders and forming your own expectations and predictions based on what you're seeing from your clients. So maybe Todd, you could start.
No, for sure. I mean, I think a big determining factor, Lynn, is actually going to be the mindset of the candidate, right? Are they comfortable with more interactive or face-to-face contact, even within the next 3, 6, or 12 months? And if not, what do you do? Because you need the individuals, you need the talent. So you're going to have to adapt. I mean, for me, obviously the severity of this mindset, I think, will lessen, where, everything's got to be virtual. I don't think that's here to stay. I think human contact is obviously important, and where a handshake isn't necessarily all that important. But I think what is easier in face-to-face is building that relationship and trust. But my view is you'll definitely see this reality lessen in hiring and recruiting, in my view. But I think what's got to change, or what needs to change, is the mindset of the hiring managers and the people doing the hiring, that there may be some anxiety, there may be some lack of trust in the process. And if you really want that talent that's going to drive your organization forward, you are going to have to, accept that, you may have to hire just simply through video meet, or adapt more to the needs of the candidate. I know I've hired solely on video meet myself, and it's worked out very well in the past.
Zach, do you have any thoughts that you want to add to that?
Yeah, quickly, I'll just say, I agree with much of what Todd says, and I'll add that I think you'll see organizations find their own path on this. And they're going to have to be responsive to what the candidates are looking for or want, as Todd says. But I think those forward-thinking organizations and that are reflective and creative and really think about their process, they might find that they really like their new processes. So when things return to some kind of normal, they might retain a bunch of it. So maybe it's, you've got 5 candidates, and you use video to cut that down to the top 2. And then you just need to invite those top 2 on site. So you're creating efficiencies for yourself because you can. Even if you've got people in the same city that you're interviewing, the video interview is still more convenient than going on site. So if organizations develop confidence in how they're doing it and they like it, I think they'll stick with it, and we'll see more of that. And we'll see more, from technology companies and others. We'll see all kinds of new, call them assessment tools or interactive online tools that enable a kind of a richer interviewing experience. And so we'll see more and more of it in the future.
I have another question that's popped up from Lisa. And Lisa, you can unmute your mic if you'd like to engage in a conversation as well. Lisa's asking, are employers being ignorant at this time to think that while the talent pool has increased due to COVID and the loss of jobs, they can offer less to their candidates? I always tell my clients or students to make it a two-way interview, which I think is great advice, by the way. I'm just going to put that in there.
So offer less as compensation?
Yeah.
Todd, what do you think?
Well, I mean, my comment there, Zach, and you're doing a lot more on the negotiation side than I am, but you know, Lisa, we would really advise against that when we're engaged in the recruiting process with a client. You know, part of it is, you know, the market is still the market. So, you know, where we're seeing a temporary, you know, shift in terms of employees being available, top talent is top talent. And for you to start shifting the market rates and the internal equity within your organization for, let's say, lack of a better word, a bit of a blip in the talent market is, you know, we would really push against that. I personally haven't seen people trying to offer less outside the range if it's that the skill they're looking for. I don't know about you, Zach.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it doesn't feel strategic at all to do that. Try to make, I guess, a quick buck. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the, you know, internal equity and the fact that, you know, you're not likely to get off on the right foot with those individuals. I could see if employers are hiring people and the candidates they're looking at are kind of desperate for work. You know, we don't really see that situation too much, I don't think. So could be that some employers are trying that, you know, taking that little shortcut, but you know, for more professional level roles, I'd say no, we don't really see that, and absolutely not really advised.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately anybody who's trying to undervalue a new hire, you don't want to work for them anyway.
No, it's a good point, Lynn. And I know Lorraine from DECO is saying the same thing, that she's not seeing people offering less. But the key, what we really are telling organizations is it's so critical on how you are treating new hires and employees at this time, because there will be options, right? And if you don't feel you've been treated poorly or don't trust the organization, you'll ultimately move on.
I would also imagine that managing expectations during the interview process must be, I guess, a bigger priority, I'll say, because you could hire somebody on the expectation that you're working virtually and you're planning to do this for several months. And then, you know, 3-4 months down the road, things could change completely, and all of a sudden you have to change tactics. So what do you think about, does that put an extra layer of responsibility on the hiring managers?
Yeah, I'll jump on that, Lynn. I should have even mentioned this. I mean, that's the kind of thing that's perfect for a job posting, and then throughout, right? Sort of peppered throughout your process. It's either a constant communication or it's made very clear a number of times. So, I mean, we've seen this with our clients trying to really craft these job postings. So it might say something like, you're going to work virtually for now, of course, and you know, when things return to some kind of normal, we expect that you'll work a mix of on-site and from home. So you're right. That's a kind of expectation to manage, and it's just more transparency or clarity that it's important to provide candidates with, because they're going to ask it or they're going to want to know. It's important to have that hammered out and talk about it.
Thank you. So we have probably time for one more quick question if anybody would like to jump in. Very shy group this morning.
Thanks, Kevin.
I will remind everybody that we'll be sending this webinar recording out, including, I hope, the presentation slides. We can share those, gentlemen?
Yes, for sure.
Excellent. So I know that both Todd and Zach were very, very open to anyone contacting them with questions if they weren't addressed today. So if we didn't get to your question or you just weren't feeling it, please feel free to reach out to them. They're very gracious and kind about sharing their expertise with everybody. So I really hope you enjoyed this morning's session. We're just about at noon, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And the webinar recording should be up within a day or two, and we'll send you a little note just to let you know when it's ready for your viewing. Todd and Zach, thank you again both so much. I really enjoyed this morning's session, and I hope you guys had some fun.
Yeah, no, thank you. It was great. Really enjoyed it.
Good.
Thanks,
All
Lynn.
right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.